Hi, it's Mobile Max. It's Thursday evening, January 23rd. I want to talk about John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. Very charismatic. Did many good things for this country. And Oliver Stone was right. Definitely there was a conspiracy. People wanted him dead. But I'm going to tell you, knowing what I know now and knowing about history and communism, he made his own bed. He pissed off some of the most powerful people in this country. Point number one, I think this country was entirely very naive about the cruelty and strength of the KGB and communism in general. For instance, at the end of World War II, a couple weeks before it ended, Harry S. Truman, the President of the United States after Roosevelt died, made a deal with Joseph Stalin to invade Manchuria. And what happened was there was a fight between our guy, Chiang Kai-shek, and Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was the communist. And it was a pretty equal fight. But as soon as the communist Soviet Union came in, you know what happened. And they're still communist. Red China's still communist because of the naivety and ignorance of Harry S. Truman, letting the Soviet Union... Now, they had a good reason for letting the Soviet Union invade Manchuria. There was like 1 million Japanese troops there, and our country had taken a terrible beating, taking all those islands in the Central Pacific. The Japanese were stubborn, ruthless. They did not surrender. Most of them during that period, you would just have to kill them off because very few surrendered. It was part of their culture. You served the emperor and you died for the emperor. That's the way it was. No surrender. That was very dishonorable. At any rate, we had lost a lot of Marines, and we thought we were going to have to invade Japan, and we had estimates up to 250,000 casualties and more. Naturally, we got the atomic bomb, but to ensure that the war came to an end, Harry Truman made a deal with Joseph Stalin, and 1 million Russian troops invaded Manchuria, and beat the 1 million Japanese that were there. And yeah, the war ended shortly after that. In fact, the war ended and the Soviet Union kept on fighting. I should tell you something right there. Number two, Cuba, 1898. The United States has a war with Spain. Cuba is one of their positions. We chased the Spanish out of Cuba, out of the Philippines too, for that matter. I think we had to pay money for, anyway, forget about Philippines. Cuba, we chased the Spanish out and tried to give the Cubans democracy, freedom. I mean, it was always a pretty rough country that always had political divide. But the communists coming into Cuba was a terrible thing for the United States. The bottom line with communism, and the founder of communism, the guy who wrote about it, Karl Marx, one of the basic principles of communism is there'll never be a true communist state until the whole world is communist. The Russians worked hard, even during the revolution, which was terrible and hard, but they were strong and stubborn. They took a long time for them to defeat their enemies, the white Russians and etc. There's a lot of wars going on. Fighting Poland, fighting Ukraine, who wanted to be independent, fighting the Baltic states, Latvia. Anyway, they did a terrible lot of fighting and conniving, and communists were tough, and they had smart, tough people who were very determined to spread communism. Do you know, after World War I, Hungary was a communist country? A lot of countries were fighting communism. That's the reason for World War II. The fascists were an answer to communists. Anyway, communists are determined for the whole world. It's one of their basic principles. So it wasn't like, oh, those communists, those Russians, they're behind us, their technology is bad, and they're basic peasants, and we're a lot smarter. No way. 1960, there was a very close election between John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Richard Nixon. He only won by like 50,000 votes. Anyway, John Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, father of Robert and Ted and John Fitzgerald Kennedy, his first fortune, according to, I guess, myth or gossip, Joe Kennedy's first fortune came during Prohibition. He smuggled in Irish whiskey from Ireland to the United States. And he knew a lot of Italian mafia. So he got his son, during the election was so close, they had to get help from the Italian mafia to get Illinois and West Virginia to win in the electoral college, and by a few votes. Anyway, they asked help from the Italian mafia, and the reason the Italian mafia had a lot of power, and you're wondering, why didn't they arrest these criminals, these mobsters? The reason that the Italian mafia, La Cosa Nostra, didn't have any problem for a long time, up until like the end of the 80s, 90s, that was the end, when they busted the Teflon Don, John Gotti. Anyway, during World War II, we invaded, they had Operation Torch, we invaded Tunisia and then Libya, those Mideast countries. We invaded it along with the British, Montgomery. And after we were done winning in Tunisia, we wanted to cross over into Sicily. And then Sicily, after Sicily, the mainland of Italy. But the fact was that we needed help from the Italian mafia. They had close connections to Italy and especially Sicily. I mean, supposedly that's where their main base was before they came to the United States, was Italian. Sicily was where the mafia grew, the Italian mafia. Anyway, on the 7th Army, when they invaded Sicily, we had Italian Americans at the front of the 7th Army going into the Sicilian towns and speaking Italian to the people, telling them we're coming and surrender. And they did. Pretty much all the Italian soldiers in Sicily surrendered to the Allies. And during the Sicilian invasion, I think the whole country of Italy surrendered. I mean, the Germans didn't allow it, but that wasn't the point, is we needed the help of the mafia to, take over, win the war in Sicily and Italy. Anyway, Italian mafia, and also another point is the docks, the eastern docks. The Italian mafia ran the Longshoremen's Union, and they had a lot of power during World War II over labor and the docks where the ships go. And naturally, during World War II, there was a lot of weapons and cargo coming out of those eastern docks, those eastern harbors. Anyway, bottom line is, Italian mafia had a lot of power and they were protected. John Fitzgerald Kennedy agreed for the Bay of Pigs invasion. That was anti-Castro Cubans. Cubans had left Cuba and hated Castro, were invading it now during the Bay of Pigs, and we helped them and trained them. I think they had a couple airplanes, but I think our CIA had a mole in there, and Castro and the communists already knew about this invasion. So they stopped them, and we should have, and the CIA was right, because should never have this enemy 90 miles from our shore in Cuba. It was a big problem for us to have the Soviet communists so close. The proof of that is they put missiles in. I mean, Kennedy should have authorized United States military, not only the Air Force, but extra Army troops to invade Cuba alongside the anti-Castro forces, and made sure that we took over Cuba. But that didn't happen. Castro put everybody in prison who tried to attack during the Bay of Pigs. And that pissed off the CIA, and it was the wrong move for Kennedy. So the bottom line is, Kennedy was rich, he was arrogant, and he's very decadent. And one thing a lot of the big shots, the big power players didn't like is Kennedy philandered around and had many mistresses. And there's many stories about how Marilyn Monroe, for instance, supposedly Kennedy got Marilyn Monroe pregnant and then forced an abortion on her. So a lot of these strong elite, power elite people didn't like that Kennedy was arrogant and decadent and naive about the real state of the dangers of communism in the world, and he betrayed a lot of people, because not only did he not help the Italian mafia after they helped him get elected, but his brother, the Attorney General, Robert Kennedy, went after the Italian mafia. And another problem was he was talking about breaking up the CIA. I don't think he was ever going to do it, but he did talk about it. And also Vietnam. Vietnam may have been the wrong move, but at the time, I think, believe it or not, we had to show the communists we were powerful, and we weren't going to stand for them turning all the world communist. It was a big threat. We got protected. We were liberal ignorants who didn't know the lay of the land, but communism and the people who were running it were really smart. The KGB was very powerful. In 1960, the CIA was only 13 years old. They were just barely getting their feet under them. Where the KGB had been around since the revolution, and probably earlier. They probably have their roots for hundreds of years as right-hand Game of Thrones for the czars. Anyway, bottom line is the KGB was like the Encyclopedia Britannica of tradecraft, and we were the Harry Potter of tradecraft in 1960. We were just getting started. So Kennedy was a big threat for a lot of these people, and they really thought that he was putting our country in big danger. I'm sure money had a lot to do with it too. I know the industrial military structure is very, very slick in getting Americans and the government to spend money on weapons and such. But at any rate, I think Kennedy pissed a lot of the wrong people off, and he put himself in this position. He made his own bed, and I'm sorry he got assassinated, and it definitely was a wrong thing, but he only had himself to blame. Thank you.